Everybody, thank you so much for coming, and thank you to everyone at home that's tuning in. We're so excited to be back for a second weekend of shows, and I am so proud of the dancers, and I can't wait for you to see what they've done. A couple quick reminders and thank yous before we get started. Please keep your mask on at all times. That means over your nose as well. Natalie DeVito will be playing the role of Sugar Plum in both shows today, and after the show is done, the cast is going to come out to greet you. Thank you, Everett and James, for doing our lights and sound and projection. Thank you, Jens and Cenholt Consulting, for live stream photos and videos, which will be available for purchase. Thank you, T and Rockin' Dancewear, for our Rockwell apparel. You can visit her on Instagram at Rockin' Dancewear LLC. Thank you, Patty Jarrett, who's our in-house PT. Thank you for taking care of our dancers and keeping them strong. Thank you, Margaret Murphy, for being my rehearsal assistant and my choreography assistant, and it's your birthday today, and I love you. Happy birthday, Margie. Thank you to the Jarretts, the Churgwins, the Rochelles, the Russells, and the Gallos for letting us borrow their projectors. Thank you to my husband, Greg, Natalie, and Harrison for building our set for the incredible photo shoot. It came out amazing. Thank you. And last but not least, thank you to all the healthcare workers and the essential workers and the nurses and doctors and PAs and everyone that goes out there every day to keep us safe, healthy. We wouldn't be able to be here. We wouldn't be able to be having this show without you. So grateful from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. And everybody enjoy the show. Bye.
Say Merd.
Merd.
Good evening, friends. My name is Eric Drosselmeyer, and it is my honor to be your host on what will prove to be a magical journey. I am going to tell you a story with music, a story about a young girl named Clara on a Christmas a long time ago in a land far away. The story of Clara and the Nutcracker Prince has been told by many different people in many different ways. In 1892, a man named Peter Tchaikovsky wrote the music for a ballet based on this very story. He called it The Nutcracker. This ballet has been performed countless times in the last 100 years and has become a holiday tradition for people all over the world. Now, allow me to set the stage for you. Imagine the feel of the holiday season. Lights glistening on the snow, joyful carols, majestic stars in the winter sky, a crackling fire, and warm, spicy aromas coming from the kitchen. Anything can happen. Anything is possible. Throughout the ballet, as you listen to the music, you will hear the orchestra tell different parts of the story and represent different characters. The orchestra is made up of many different kinds of instruments, each one with its own distinct voice. Listen carefully as the instruments talk to you and let the fanfare of the strings and the flutes carry you into the magical world of the Nutcracker. Christmas Eve had come at last. Clara and her brother Fritz were very excited. The two had been good for such a long time, and it was finally the night before Christmas. It was time to trim the tree and await the grand Christmas party with all of their friends and family. Clara and Fritz were eagerly anticipating the arrival of their favorite uncle, yours truly, Herr Drosselmeyer, who always comes like St. Nicholas, bearing great big bags of gifts. Now the other children find me a bit frightening, and it is true. Pulled up to the house. Everyone was in good humor, laughing and smiling as they greeted each other, and all the children joined Clara and Fritz here in the parlor, dreaming about what they would find in their Christmas packages. Hi, everyone at home. Again, we apologize. We haven't forgotten about you. Don't worry. We are probably going to be good to go in about 5 minutes. So if you could just bear with us a little longer, we want to make sure that you're able to see every minute of this awesome production. So thank you again, and we should hopefully see you in about 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to
Good evening, friends. My name is Everett Drosselmeyer, and it is my honor to be your host on what will prove to be a magical journey. I am going to tell you a story with music, a story about a young girl named Clara on a Christmas a long time ago in a land far away. The story of Clara and the Nutcracker Prince has been told by many different people in many different ways. In 1892, a man named Peter Tchaikovsky wrote the music for a ballet based upon this very story. He called it The Nutcracker. This ballet has been performed countless times in the last 100 years and has become a holiday tradition for people all over the world. Now, allow me to set the stage for you. Imagine the feel of the holiday season. Lights glistening on the snow, joyful carols, majestic stars in the winter sky, a crackling fire, and warm, spicy aromas coming from the kitchen. Anything can happen. Anything is possible. Throughout the ballet, as you listen to the music, you will hear the orchestra tell different parts of the story and represent different characters. The orchestra is made up of many different kinds of instruments, each one with its own distinct voice. Listen carefully as the instruments talk to you and let the fanfare of the strings and the flutes carry you into the magical world of the Nutcracker. Christmas Eve had come at last. Clara and her brother Fritz were very excited. The two had been good for such a long time, and it was finally the night before Christmas. It was time to trim the tree and await the grand Christmas party with all of their friends and family. Clara and Fritz were eagerly anticipating the arrival of their favorite uncle, yours truly, Herr Drosselmeyer, who always comes like St. Nicholas, bearing great big bags of gifts. Now, the other children find me a little frightening, and it is true, I am a bit mysterious. But my Christmas gifts were always very special. Some may even say magical, and given with thoughtfulness and love. Wait until the children see what I brought this year. 2 additional and very lifelike gifts that no one has ever seen before. Clara and Fritz waited and waited for the party guests to arrive, and finally, with a merry jingling of silver bells, the carriages pulled up to the house. Everyone was in good humor, laughing and smiling as they greeted each other. All the children joined Clara and Fritz in the parlor, dreaming about what they would find in their Christmas packages. By now, it was late in the evening. The party had ended and the guests had said their farewells. Clara and Fritz were tucked into their beds upstairs, but Clara could not sleep because she was thinking of her poor, injured Nutcracker. As soon as the house grew silent, she slipped out of bed, put on her robe and slippers, and tiptoed down the dimly lit stairs into the drawing room, where she found him resting peacefully. Thank goodness, she sighed. Then, overcome with drowsiness, she lay down and promptly fell asleep. A clap of thunder awoke her. Lightning flashed once, twice, 3 times, and in its brilliance, everything in the drawing room began to change. Moonlight shone through the tall windows, making the Christmas tree and the chairs and the tables look ghostly in the darkened room. The clock in the corner even looked like the stooped figure of me, Herr Drosselmeyer. Clara herself told herself that there was nothing to be afraid of, but a squeaking and scuttling in the shadows startled her. When she turned toward the Christmas tree, she gasped aloud. The tree had grown to a huge size, stretching far up into the darkness, and there under the branches was an army of mice. Led by the fearsome Mouse King, they began advancing on Fritz's tin soldiers. The Nutcracker had been laying motionless under the tree where Clara had placed him, but now as she looked up in wonder, he stood up, and he called to the toy soldiers to follow him into battle. The soldiers quickly loaded their cannons with the only missiles they could find, candy and gingerbread from the tree. They fired bonbons into the air, but the mice just caught them and gobbled them down, looking about for more. They were neither hurt nor frightened. The Nutcracker drew his sword and led the soldiers in a brave attack, but the mice were quicker, not being made of wood or tin, and they outnumbered the soldiers. Clara feared that the mice would win, and as she watched, the Mouse King charged the Nutcracker with his twisted sword. Hand to hand, they fought all around the room, and Clara cried out as the Nutcracker almost fell. She knew she had to do something to help, but before she quite had time to think, she tore off her slipper and threw it at the head with all her might of the Mouse King. To her surprise, the hideous beast fell to the floor and lay motionless. The mice, seeing their leader fall, suddenly began to shriek and squeak and run away, stopping only to pick up the body of their king and carry him off. The toy soldiers raised their swords and cheered. They turned and marched back to their box under the Christmas tree to bandage their wounds. Overcome with emotion, Clara runs back to the Christmas tree and falls asleep. When she wakes up, she remembers the fight. She looks all around the parlor to see if any of the mice or soldiers are still there. When she turns around, she can hardly believe her eyes. The Nutcracker was no longer a painted wooden toy, but he had magically turned into a real live prince. Then the most astonishing thing happened. The parlor and everything in it began to fade away, and Clara found herself standing in a forest. The prince seemed to know where they were. Serving as her guide and protector, he led her into the trees. Clara didn't dare ask where they were going for fear that if she spoke, the spell would be broken, and she would find herself back in her own moonlit parlor. As they walked, the wind sighed and whispered high in the fir trees, and Clara felt snowflakes upon her cheeks. The snow fell lightly at first, drifting here and there, but the forest was soon covered with a glittery blanket of white. The air swirled with snowflakes of the purest white, and snow fairies spun before them in a wintry, welcoming dance. angels carried the news to the land of the sweets that the young prince was finally coming home. Gliding around the sugar plum fairy, the angels sang a joyous song as she summoned all of the delights that the prince and his guest Clara might enjoy. When they arrived at the prince's palace, which was made entirely of spun sugar, the delicious smell surprised Clara. She gazed in wonder at what she saw. Walking along the path, the warm light of day began to reveal more and more. Somehow the road stayed white and sparkling beneath their feet, and when Clara looked hard, she was certain it was no longer fallen snow that they were walking on, but pure white sugar icing. And that was not the only curious thing. Everything in the prince's kingdom appeared to be made of or covered with candies and sweets. The white sugar road soon led them to the center of town. There were reindeer stooped at a fountain, bubbling with red raspberry cordial. People began to gather to greet the prince and Clara. Each and every one of them was splendidly dressed and wore costumes that reminded Clara of flowers and tempting foods. Then the most beautiful fairy came forward. Her tiara sparkled and her outfit shimmered like crystalline sugar. When she spoke, her voice rose and fell like the flutter of musical notes. "I am the sugar plum fairy," she said to Clara. "Welcome to the kingdom of sweets." The Nutcracker prince proudly introduced Clara to the sugar plum fairy and shared in glorious detail how Clara had valiantly saved his life in the battle with the wretched Mouse King. In gratitude for Clara's most courageous act, the sugar plum fairy summoned all of her friends in the kingdom of sweets. One by one they came. The first to arrive was his Spanish hot chocolate, ole! Followed next by dark and exotic Arabian coffee. Then a spirited box of Chinese tea appeared. Soon behind, Russian candy canes came jumping and leaping, chased by dainty marzipan mirlitons, playing their reed flutes in a most ladylike fashion. Last, but certainly not least, the graceful dewdrop, accompanied by her long-stemmed flowers, and filled the candied palace with fragrance and color. The sugar plum fairy had assembled everyone, and now they were prepared to dance for Clara. Clara was so astonished by what she'd seen. This is what it must be like, she thought, to be inside one of Drosselmeyer's magical inventions. The Sugar Plum Fairy had assembled all the delights together to say their goodbyes to Clara with one final dance. She then summoned Clara to come down to her. She and the prince thanked Clara for her goodness and courage and explained that it was now time for them to leave. Clara could feel the tears beginning to rise as she slowly said goodbye to them. When Clara turned around, she was surprised to find that somehow she was back at home. Was it only a dream after all? But on the ground outside there was a new covering of snow and 2 sets of footprints. The Nutcracker was there in the corner with a bit of fairy dust still on him. And now Clara knew, sometimes our dreams are real.